You are listening to I'll Follow You, a podcast about creative process and what really goes on behind the scenes of an artistic life. My name is Allison Felis, and I love talking to musicians, writers, visual artists, and other brilliant thinkers about their working methods, obsessions, and pet projects. Guess what? Just by tuning in, you're part of the inner circle now. Hello, and welcome, or welcome back, to I'll Follow You. Today, I am just delighted to be in conversation with pianist and healer Marta Johnson. Marta's first career was as a professional pianist, mostly working in the classical and musical theater worlds in Chicago. However, a crisis of performance anxiety brought her to the world of inner healing and spiritual growth. And now, she uses internal family systems and AuraTransformation in her own life, as well as in her professional practice with others. So, if you've never heard of internal family systems, much less AuraTransformation, don't worry. They're both a big part of what we'll be talking about today. You'll be getting a whole crash course on not just what they are, but also why and how they can be super helpful for addressing a range of psychological and spiritual concerns. As a musician and healer myself, I was just personally really excited to connect with Marta and have a chance to dig deep on topics like how, as performers, sometimes when our anxiety is at its highest, great beauty can be present there as well. How it can be a lot to ask of a little kid to perform publicly at their first music recitals. How important it is to stay relaxed when big emotional releases come up during our healing journeys. How an encounter with a place called the Redemption Window allowed Marta to practice self-forgiveness. What happens when your aura isn't taking care of you the way that it used to. And perhaps most potently for this current moment, how crucial it is to learn to welcome the hate and anger that lives inside all of us and relate to it with kindness and care so that we can ultimately distill and bring it into health instead of spreading it out into the world around us. Be sure to check out the show notes at my website, queenofpeaches.com, for tons of explanatory links, in addition to booking information, should you be inspired to work with Marta directly in a one-on-one capacity or in one of her incredibly supportive group sessions. And now, my conversation with Marta Johnson. All right, so Marta Johnson, I'm so happy to be on screen with you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to chat with you.
Oh, this is going to be awesome because, we were chatting a little bit before I hit record, and we just have so much in common and so many places where we overlap. And, one of the big things I want to talk about right off the bat is IFS, internal family systems. But before we even get into what it is and how it works, I just want to thank you for being the person who introduced me to that concept, because it kind of really changed my life. I mean, because right after I did the workshop with you where I kind of learned just the broad strokes of what IFS is, it just set me up for, I was in transition between therapists at the time. My previous therapist had gotten ill and left her practice. And so I was between therapists, and then I ended up going to work with a Jungian therapist who works with IFS a lot. And so I was boom, I was ready to go as soon as day one, session one with her, because I already knew what it was. And so I was thank you, Marta, for being the person to bring that in and just have it so that it was kind of ready to go in my life.
Well, you're so welcome. And, one of the beauties of IFS, internal family systems, is it's so intuitive. When you tell people that we're made up of many parts, one part wants to lay on the couch and another part wants to go exercise, everybody gets that, it's very user friendly.
And it's also, I think we were talking a little bit about, the degree to which we are astrology nerds and or not astrology nerds. But I was sort of learning a little bit more about astrology at the same time. And it kind of made sense together, because it was there are these other elements that influence my personality, because it's so easy, especially when I was younger, to think I am one thing And if I'm not consistently this one thing, then I am wrong and I am bad and I need to be fixed. And realizing, no, there's a multitude of aspects of myself that all need to be heard and need to be respected. And so thinking of like that is either like my moon sign, my sun sign, my Venus, placement, and then relating that sort of to internal family systems, I was like, oh, right. Okay, this is all kind of different ways of describing kind of the same thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I love that. Have you found that as you work with the relationship to the moon sign and the different signs, is it, like the main goal in IFS is connecting to and witnessing our parts and knowing that when there's that connection, change happens because our system is oriented towards change and oriented towards health and growing. And so does it work the same with astrology too?
I had an amazing session with the astrologer and herbalist Meg Keane, and they do a thing where they specifically look at the signs that are, or what's going on sort of in your fifth house. And what's going on in my fifth house is Libra, and it sort of relates to my Venus, and my Venus, which is in Capricorn. And I've always sort of felt like, oh, my Venus in Capricorn is not very sexy. It's very sort of, Capricorn is always kind of dull and, again, stereotypically in that sort of Instagram astrology kind of way, where it's like, oh, it's planning and ambition. But then in having this session with Meg, I realized like, oh, in giving, again, space and attention and understanding to my Venus in Capricorn, I saw the gifts of what it was and was able to transform even my own relationship to what that was, rather than resisting it and feeling like, no, I want to be glamorous Venus and sexy Venus, not like solid Venus, but seeing it in a different way allowed me to bring in the gifts of what that is in my chart and what that brings to my life. So yeah, it was definitely a similar mechanism.
That's so cool. I mean, as you're probably figuring out, I'm not that knowledgeable about astrologies, but this idea that like whatever the surface level presentation is that we come in with, a part or a astrology sign or whatever, like that's just the first level. And then it's through, and same thing with people, right? Like the first thing you meet is just that level. And then as you get to know any of these layers, parts or energies, that connection changes the essence of the part, or we get more to the essence of the part and how it's really wanting to be at its best self in a person's life.
And when that happens, like the amount of energy that gets freed up, I mean, it's like ridiculous. It's so amazing. And it's like, yeah, it's one of those things that it's impossible to describe until you experience it personally, where you're like, oh, I didn't know I was leaking energy in this aspect of my life until you shore up that part and give it some love and give it some attention. And then again, it just like leaves gifts at your feet. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're already like deep into it, but like just for the benefit of folks who might not know about IFS or want to experience more of this excitement that we're both experiencing in discussing it, just give us a little sketch of what IFS even is.
Well, it stands for internal family systems. And the idea is that there are parts of us that take on certain roles that are somewhat predictable. So there are the manager type parts who like help us plan and think ahead, and they look forward in time and backward in time. And then there are the firefighter parts who are all about comfort now. And at their best, they're like bringing us pleasure and enjoyment. But then these ones, all of our parts can get out of balance. But, the out of balance firefighters are the addictive type parts. And that can be along a whole spectrum. And one of the things I love about IFS is that it's not pathologizing addiction or parts that act out in any way, that there's a really positive intention. And just knowing, with the firefighters, usually there's some need for comfort or pleasure in the moment. Like that is so like the world we live in, we all need comfort. So blessings and thanks to those firefighters who do that. And then there are the exile parts who hold our deepest wounds. And those are often our young parts who, like they're at their essence, they carry things like joy and innocence and creativity and playfulness. But then as time goes on and they get wounded, they hold the I'm not good enough, I'm bad, shame, I'm invisible, those kinds of things. And then holding this whole system is what IFS calls self-energy. And, other people might call it your soul or your essence or the true self, and whatever name you want to call it. It's the energy that is able to witness and hold anything that's going on. It's really able to be with anything and without judgment. And often when we're connecting with self-energy, or self-energy is more available, compassion comes out, curiosity, calm, space and openness, non-judgment. So that's kind of, the goal in IFS is to be relating to each of our parts, whatever way they're showing up. And then as building that relationship, more and more self-energy can come in. And then when that happens, parts change. And we get to know, like we were talking about, their true desires, their true essence of what they want to be doing in a system, because we don't want to get rid of any parts. Like I was saying, the firefighters, we don't want to get rid of those parts that bring us comfort. That is essential to being human. And same thing with our manager parts, an out of balance manager might be to be a really strong critic, inner critic, or out criticizing other people too, or workaholic or anything like that. And we don't want to get rid of that. Like a critic, when it softens, is more about discernment and judgment. I guess discernment is better than judgment, but clarity of what is true for me, what is right for me, what do I need to know? And we live in a world where we need to work jobs and we need to make money. So we need those manager parts to be doing those functions. So it's really about trying to bring our parts more and more into their healthiest version of themselves.
Oh, I love that. It's so rich. It's so good. And it's so, it just makes so much sense. And it's such a, I just wish more therapists used it as a modality, because it's it can be, I was noticing again, in my journey, I mean, I've been in therapy since I was in my mid-20s, and I had amazing therapists, one and all, but I would notice at a certain point with some of the first ones I was working with, that it would just become a weekly recitation of just crap. It was oh, this bugs me, or I'm struggling with this. And, it was nice to be witnessed and heard, and have someone say oh, that's normal, or don't beat yourself up about this. But just that turn to hearing these experiences as sort of emanations or experiences that my parts were having or instigating or fighting against or whatever. I just feel it's so helpful to just ease up on oneself. I mean, and again, it might just be sort of the aging process too. I mean, because I started getting into this in my late 30s, early 40s, which is sort of that classic Jungian time of sort of turning inwardly anyway. So it might have just been where I was naturally headed anyway. But it's just, I just feel it has such broad applications, which sort of brings me to my next thing that I want to talk about is you got into this because you were having terrible performance anxiety as a musician. So tell me a little bit about, how you discovered IFS and how that came to interrelate with, the struggles that you were having as a performer.
Yeah, so I'm a classical pianist and have, started lessons when I was 5. And when I was in college, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to be a musician, but, it was I enjoyed some of the benefits of mostly I enjoyed the afterglow of the recitals or the afterglow of whatever. And I loved my teacher. And so when I got out of college, I actually got a job in campaign finance reform, and it was the most depressing thing I've ever done in my life.
That's amazing.
So discouraging. And I had a church job in Chicago, and I hardly knew how to play the organ. And the church was a Norwegian church where the services were still in Norwegian. Wow. And so it was just this little bit of music, and it was the thing that I was enjoying the most. So I was okay, I need to stick with the music plan. And so I went back, got a master's degree. And I had a lot of tension in my shoulders, and over time that just was getting worse and worse. And so I took a mind-body skills class. or Heal Your Back Pain. I can't remember what it's called now, but anyways, you know, it was so clear to me as soon as I took that class. It was like, of course, my shoulders are like keeping in all the emotions. So I was like, okay, I'm going to let out all the emotions. And with that, it was like I was knocked sideways by anxiety. Like I had no idea how much anxiety I was stuffing in to maintain just how I functioned in the world. And so then I went on, you know, like I did all sorts of stuff to try to figure out how to deal with it, and took some really great classes on like functioning, how to function better when you have anxiety, like better practice techniques and all that kind of stuff, which are very useful, but it wasn't really solving it. So I think I was like Googling life coaching, and I just happened to find, you know, this person who does IFS. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'm interested in life coaching as like exploring the next option of healing the performance anxiety. And so, you know, I tried some sessions with her, and it was, you know, she's a life coach, but used it therapeutically. So I was paying out of pocket, and I was like having this resistance of like, oh, I don't want to pay out of pocket, but I just want to keep going back and doing more of this. And so like, you know, it was like this slow drawing me in, like, oh, I really like this. And it just made so much sense to me that like there were, and it was so relieving to be able to say, yeah, there are parts of me that are terrified and so scared. And to have the help of like, I think it's really common when people go into the emotions that feel scary, it's like, it can seem like a deep pool or like an endless hole. And having that guidance to go into that space with the titration of slowing it down like a little bit at a time. So it's not, you know, it's not a, what's that word where it's like cathartic. It's not a cathartic experience. It's a relationship building experience. That just brought me so much more relief in accepting myself and accepting where I was at. And over time, it greatly reduced my anxiety. Like I, you know, like I didn't even know that I was living with chronic anxiety on a day-to-day basis. And over several years, anxiety became a visitor instead of the state of being. Yeah, I could have more to say about what came after that, but I don't know if you want to pause or say anything, or yeah.
No, this is all so good. I mean, because you know, and again, it's a question that I want to dig into at some point, wherever and however it fits in, but it's also, this is not just, you know, I mean, again, you were sort of attacking it from sort of like a more like psychological perspective, because you're like, I have anxiety. This is like messing up my life. Like I need to address this, but it's also so clearly spiritual. And so, yeah, I also just sort of am curious about how the spiritual journey fits in for you. And it seems like it was something that was really, yeah, it seemed like it was kind of one and the same energy, you know, where it was like, oh, in working with my parts, it was also learning to care for your spirit and your soul beyond just kind of like, I want to be able to produce more, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So thinking back, like it took me a really long time to learn to relate to self energy.
Mm.
And, you know, like I honestly, I hated it at the beginning. I was like, I don't want to talk about energy. My parts are in distress. Like, let's listen to the parts in distress. And my um, coach therapist was so good at really being attentive to exactly where my parts were at. And then at a certain point, it was clear, like I did need more. I did need to expand into the next level of like, there is something bigger here helping me. And so in addition to IFS, I also started getting into learning about energy healing and just like generic energy principles. It wasn't a particular modality, but just like basic understandings of energy is constantly expanding and evolving, and there's always evolving energy available to us. And when you know, when we have these bad feelings coming out, really that's releasing the old energy. And like I feel like that to me was such a key learning, that not only relating to our parts with care, but really they're just trying to release that old stuff. And it's like a natural mechanism. It's natural that we would let our bodies do this.
Mm.
So like that started expanding me into connecting with more of the spiritual aspect of music. But I actually, for a while I was like, I'm not sure I wanted to do music more. I was kind of ready to quit. And when the pandemic hit, it was almost a relief, like in the sense of giving me a break from people asking me to play gigs. And I was like, oh, I don't have to decide about that anymore. And pricing is stressful. And yeah, I mean, there's also, had some amount of burnout because like the amount of practicing I would have to do in order to stay, to deal with my anxiety was maybe more than what the average person had to do. Um, and so like, it was just a lot of practicing, and the amount of, money never really measured up to what I felt like I was putting in. And, that was exhausting. So when the pandemic started, I was glad to not have anybody ask me for a year to play anything. And then, I had my aura transformation. This was
Ooh, I'm
just,
so excited to talk about AuraTransformation. I want to hear all about this.
yeah. So, well, just to bring it into the music piece, it so surprised me that during my aura transformation, so much about music came up, because
Mm,
I kind of thought I was done. Maybe I was done, or like it was going to be a side thing. But I had all these fantastic memories come up about like, actually, it's not just anxiety that I experience when I'm making music. Actually, those times when I felt the most anxious, there actually was beauty going on too.
mm,
And there is something really deep in me that loves to be on stage and loves to perform. And I had no idea that that was there,
wow.
because I like mostly what I related to were the fearful parts and then the manager type parts that were helping me function. And the enjoyment was secondary to that. And frankly, just really deeply buried.
Wow. That's intense. I mean, I definitely relate to that. I mean, like in again, my husband and I met through music. I mean, we played in a band together for a good like year and a half to 2 years before we ever started dating or had any sort of romance happen. But so then like within the next few years when we were living together, there was this like confusion in my own self where it was like it was very similar where it was like I got so anxious about wanting to play and I felt like so nervous and like he would say like, oh, I wrote a new song, like let's play and like I want to teach it to you, or let's go down to the practice space and just play a few tunes and whatever. And I remember one time just standing in the vestibule of our condo here and just like weeping. And I was just like, I can't do it. And he was like, I can just go be in another band then, and thinking that would help relieve me of the anxiety. And I was like, no, I want to play with you too, and just being so stuck in that anxiety and that perfectionism and that stress. And so, yeah, forgetting about the love that was underneath it all, and being able to reaccess that. So that's huge.
Yeah. And for me, I was trained in a classical way. And so growing up, we had recitals twice a year. And another thing I learned in my oral transformation, or like I had worked on this in IFS, like what it was like for those little parts of me to have to do a recital. But a lot moved during that session about like, that's a lot to ask of little kids if they don't want to be performing. And so I think, like my parents gave me the gift of music, and our family is quite musical, and music was around all the time. And there wasn't really a model for how to do it better. Like I think both of them, I know my mom for sure wished that she had more chances to have music lessons when she was a kid. So from their point of view, they were like giving us the best they could through these music lessons. And nobody knew in the 70s and the 80s about how to attune to nervous systems and like how to help kids overcome or deal with the insecurities and the fear. So at this point, it doesn't feel at all like blame. It's more just like, okay, this is how it unfolded for me. And thank goodness now I'm really connecting with it in a new way. And sometimes this does get into the spiritual side of things. Like I do believe for me that one of the ways, or like one of the choices I made in this lifetime, is that in order to really know how great music is and how wonderful it is to feel free with music, you have to know the other side. You have to know how you feel and how tied up and tight and unpleasant it can be. And so I have really explored that side of knowing how bad it can feel,
Wow.
of anxiety, memory slips, judgment, whatever, doubting myself, not feeling capable on stage. And now I get to inhabit it in a way that I get to be my whole self and be in the enjoyment, pleasure. I don't know. I think there's a real gift in that.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I've seen other sort of, astrologers and energy workers talk about that it's like as low as you can go is also as high as you can go, And so it's like the darker places that you go into when you find a way to metabolize them, it's kind of
Yeah.
the equal but opposite reaction where then you can really grow out of it and, have the gift of it yourself, but then also to be a light for other people too. So it's and that's another thing that I definitely want to talk about is like, again, you are so unfailingly generous, like with your community and with other musicians, and just so ready to help. So did that come out of that experience, like having the struggle and then being like, wait a minute, like I don't want other people to struggle, like let's do workshops, let's work together, let's have more gentle spaces where it doesn't have to be tied to that sense of performance and where it's tied to your self-worth and all that stuff.
Yes. Yes. I mean, especially being in the classical music world, like I know so many people who, oh, the self-criticism that is like trained into us. And yeah, so my heart is really with the people who want to be making music, but they have whatever restrictions for whatever reason that came into their life, and wanting to free people up in that way. Like, I think some people, like I'm kind of envious of the people who come into music with this kind of innocent, pure love, and they are able to maintain that. On the other hand, because I've been on the flip side of it, like I have such an appreciation for that gift in a different way. And so like, yeah, I don't feel like I'm talking very clearly about this, but it is, I see the wounds everywhere around me in the musician world and probably the creative world. And one of my dreams is to expand this beyond just musicians, because, Brene Brown talks about all of us have like an art wound, all of us in like school are told like, that doesn't look like an elephant, or that's stupid, or whatever, and we take that in when we're young. And so, yeah, and that ties in with IFS too, like unburdening our exiles, that we all have this creativity and a desire to share. So unburdening that so that we can connect to music. And then one other thing I'll say about it, and then maybe you can help guide me so that I can talk more clearly. And that's that I also believe that all of us have a desire to give and receive. And right now, oftentimes I think, at least in the classical music world, it's a little bit polluted in how we give and how we receive. The receiving ends up being through applause and attention and, and scrabbling over money. And some people are paid a lot and a lot of people are not paid a lot. And there's all these union fights and contract negotiations. And, there's like a lot of burdens on the side of receiving. And so therefore the giving is hampered too. So, I think the whole picture needs to be addressed of giving and receiving, that music is meant to be shared. It's a healing thing that can be done in community. I have a friend who does community singing, and she leads these groups, and she really believes that the power of singing together in a community is a healing aspect. And that's our birthright as humans. Music allows us to put sound and feeling to our experience in a way that we don't need words. And, oftentimes there's body movement that goes with it. And so, yeah, it's essential to us being human. So I'll take a pause there.
Well, I have to like talk up, not just because I interviewed her on my podcast, but Saga Briggs, who just wrote this amazing book that just came out in September called How to Change Your Body. And it's about interoception. And she's got a huge section that's all about where she interviews, musicians and dancers and other practitioners, and just talks about that alignment, that click that happens when you are dancing collectively, or it's what's the collective joy, public joy, people together singing, whether it's in church, in ritual, in some way. And yeah, that's really a thing that we've lost, right? I mean, you were just, as you were talking about, the healing that musicians that need, and it's so much of that is from, surprise capitalism, right? Like you were saying, like the contracts and the auditions and the cutthroat nature of trying to be paid your worth and paid enough to survive and live comfortably in the world. And that's something that, I don't know, I've felt more passionate about, and I talked about this with my friend Jamai Ozdemir on a recent episode of the podcast too, is just getting away from that notion in some ways that, obviously some people have gifts and want to pursue being a professional musician or a professional actor or professional, artist in some way, but bringing arts and bringing music and bringing writing and all of that back into localness and community and being with each other as, like you were saying, a human expression and not a product to be consumed or a service to be rendered, it just feels so urgent right now. I mean, and again, especially post-COVID and in times of war and conflict and just horrible, horrible shit. It's just like raising energy together through creative expression, regardless of how quote unquote good it is. It's like, what can be more urgent or needed or human than that? So I don't know. That's my statement. I don't know. Go with that where you will, but yeah, I feel it. And yeah, it feels really important to me now in ways that I am still seeking to, the podcast is part of this, part of that project, as far as like talking to people, where it's not just me sort of like typing on my little blog, it's like having these kind of conversations is part of that effort.
Yeah, for sure. Having these conversations and then the felt experience, like you're saying, of that, like the electricity and the energy that's shared when you're in a space together. And, that can happen through like group therapy or sharing or a sharing circle of any kind, building relationships, or like you're saying, dancing, movement, and singing. There's so many ways that this can happen. Yeah, like I just have been having images lately of how, it feels really, it's, even though we're not in the COVID time where people literally were locked behind their doors, but it's still like so many people's hearts are locked up. And so like, I love my neighbors, but I long for deeper connection. And, this feeling of like, we all have our walls and our doors, and what is it that's needed to help melt those so that we can get more human connection. And, I think at the root of it, so much of it is about fear of rejection. And in the music world, like that literally happens. Like you have to audition and you literally get rejected, and you'll get more rejections than you will acceptances. And the people who do well are the ones that learn to not take it personally. But interpersonally, how do we do that where we can put ourselves out there in a vulnerable, heart open way and stay resilient when things go awry? Because another thing that's happening now is like, disagreement of any kind can feel so threatening to people. And I certainly have been in that, place for a long time, but now like I'm tired of that. I don't want to be in that position anymore of like, you have to agree with me on every single thing. Like that felt like the younger manifestation of like me fighting for my air and my space to figure out how to be me. And now that I feel more comfortable in who I am, it's like, I am glad for the people I know that have differing views, and like really admire some of the people who can have these hard conversations and stay in relationship. Like those to me are the cutting edge trailblazers right now.
Which again seems so related to IFS, because it's like, how do you do that? you got to get your parts together, because if there's a part that like has that extreme need to be right at all costs, or to be seen in a certain light, to portray oneself in a certain light, where then you're putting the burden on other people to sort of like reinforce that self-perception. It gets so twisted so easily, like around. Yeah. And I'm, as you are, like sensitive, to people. So it's like, I will like unwittingly play along with that. But then I'll realize like, what am I doing? I'm like flattering this person's ego because they want to be a maniac about like, whatever thing that they're obsessed with at the moment in their own sort of wounding and pain, but yeah, so being with the parts that where you're not bringing that pollution into a discussion or into a group interaction, where you're expecting to get something rather than having an equal exchange with someone.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought the parts up into this aspect, because also in learning to fully accept every single part of us and really welcome the parts of us, that is key to learning how to accept other people and their differences. So, I remember one time in a session, I found out I had like a 1960s housewife kind of part in me. And I was like horrified that lived in me. But, like, how can it not? That's the culture we grew up in, that we were fed through media, especially growing up in the 70s and 80s, that wanting to have like this vision of a nuclear family that could serve all our needs. Like, of course that is going to live in me to some degree. Now, like, it may be 1% of me, but learning to accept that 1%. And I think also, a big challenge for people is the hateful parts of us, like especially seeing what's going on in the world right now. Being able to welcome the hate or the anger that lives in us and relating to it with kindness and care, that's how we distill it and bring it into health. So that then it doesn't need to go out in the world and be spreading the hate. Right. And spreading the anger. And so one commitment I've been making recently is to dedicate myself to finding all the places I've held on to anger in my life. And I would say I'm an expert at holding on to grudges. And I know that it doesn't solve the problem. And in fact, I was just writing on my blog that it solidifies the problem. When I hold on to the anger, that makes it intractable on my side. And if something's going to change, it's asking the other person to do like, backbends to make it better.
Right.
And that's not going to happen most of the time. You can, like if we go around expecting other people to change, we're going to be sorely disappointed. And what we can control in our life is us. And I'm not saying control our parts, but the path to that, to me, is to welcome the anger, welcome the hate, welcome whatever is most distasteful in us, and build a relationship with that feeling. And then when there's the relationship, it can soften. It may take a while, it depends on the person's system and what has led to the hurt. Usually it's a hurt that leads to the hate or anger, of course. And so it may take a while for that to happen, but I do believe it's possible. I know it's possible. It's happened to me. Like, I held grudges for 20 years. And those really softened over the last couple of years. But lately I've been practicing with my husband, like, what better person to practice our interpersonal skills with than the ones who are most intimate with us. And, they bring us the chance to really practice where we are weakest, and where one of my weak spots is holding anger and holding grudges. So I told my husband that I'm committing to practicing letting go of that anger with him.
Wow. That's great. And and again, just naming something like that and saying it out loud, and just saying like, here's a thing that I'm working on, and just letting it be known, rather than having it be this like I'm secretly in my internal lab trying to figure out something independently, and I'm doing it all on my own in this like psychotic sort of, again, individualistic kind of way that, again, our society likes to sort of pretend that that's the way that things get done, is, just one person on their own muscling through it, which is just not the thing, not the vibe.
Yeah, and I want to say just a little bit more too, is that this idea that when the fresh energy that's evolving comes into our system. So like in a way I made a commitment to, like, I am going to make a stand for committing to this fresh energy, that believing that it is possible for me to soften my anger, even though it's like over, whatever the hurts are. And it's just human inner relationships, it's not like anything massive or surprising. But anyways, so making a commitment to that, it calls in the fresh energy. And then what happened is the next day I woke up madder than ever. But but what I believe is happening with that is it's bringing to the surface the places that it's been held in my body. And so when it comes into my awareness that strongly, I know that it's actually releasing.
Right.
And so the more relaxed I can stay when that happens, the less dramatic I get about it. And so, it's like kind of a dance between relaxing when that happens and then knowing when to go to the parts and help them. And being with the parts is one way to help it release, but sometimes it's just relaxing and saying, okay, the anger is more at the surface. Okay, that just let it be that way today. And that's the way it is for however long it needs to be.
Yeah, that's been a big struggle for me. It's just like, okay, I'm in this space, and again, it's not thinking of it as, well, this is my life now. I'm just going to be a pill forever, because again, there's those younger parts of me that just would believe that was like, I would get in a mood and it was never going to change, or that I somehow needed to wrestle my quote unquote true self back out of it, that there was some self I needed to like realign myself with, like a magnet, and again, not in the sense of like IFS, like true self energy, but just like that I needed to be one thing at all, at all costs. Mm-hmm. And that any deviation from that was like wrong or bad or harmful. So what was I going to say about that? Yeah, just that, learning that it's okay and that it can pass and that it can be a moment in time. And again, I think that's also just part of getting older and being like, wait a minute, 2 decades ago, I was having that same thought and it has changed. So like, have I learned that lesson yet?
Totally. And I find that, a couple of years ago, I made a commitment to releasing some anger against some other people, the ones that I had held a grudge against for 20 years. And I did that because I wanted to have more forgiveness for myself. And I realized that it's a two-way street. Whatever the amount of energy that I project out as anger and blame towards other people, I have that same energy that goes in towards me. And I am tired of living that way. Like I am sick of feeling like I am a bad person and the huge shame that can come when I make a mistake. So now, like, my latest thing that I've been talking about a lot or just thinking into a lot is that we are allowed to make mistakes as humans. In fact, we are going to make mistakes as humans. So how we can choose how we're going to relate to those mistakes, and we can choose the guidance and the path forward. And IFS is one way to do that, but also just knowing, like, being human, we're going to make mistakes. So yeah, I made a little video about that. About giving the middle finger to perfectionism. And then a couple of days later, I went on a solo camping trip and I parked in a illegal parking spot in Chicago and I got my car towed.
Oh, I saw your blog about that. I was actually going to ask about that. Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, oh, I'm bringing up what needs to be healed because, it was like, for me, it was all the shame of like, I broke a rule and I got caught and I'm supposed to be punished. And I almost started laughing when this happened because when I got to the car towing place, it said, if this door is locked, go to the redemption window down this way. And I was like, redemption window. And I walk over there and it's bulletproof glass that you can't see anything through. And it says these big letters of redemption window. And I was like, are you speaking to my parts that think I'm sinful? Do I need to be redeemed here? Like,
Oh
it's
my
just,
God.
and then, so I can't see the person through the glass, and all I can hear is her voice and her hand asking for my money. And I was like, I even said to her, I was like, is this a game? She's like, ma'am, this is not a game. And I was like, I know it's not a game.
Oh my
But,
God.
like, it's because it felt so ridiculous. It felt like I'm seeing this is like, it is one way to perceive things that's no longer true for me, that I'm sinful if I make a mistake, and that I need redemption by some authority to grant it to me. And like, I can't even see the person granting me redemption. It's just this voice. It was, yeah. So, and then I went camping by myself. So I got to work through all the shame which was great, like, let it up, be in nature. And yeah, like, to me, that feels like the path forward. And the more I do that, the less angry I am at the other people. And now, like, I just am noticing, can't remember what happened, but my husband made a mistake recently. And I was like, oh, the old way would have been to be so mad at him about that. And it's like, oh, not a big deal.
Yeah. That's huge. Yeah. Cause I've definitely, my husband and I have been together for over 10 years, but we just got married, like 3 years ago. And yeah, it's the same thing where it's like, oh yeah, that's fine. And it was like, whatever. And again, like realizing that like weird, perfectionism things that like I needed to have a certain way in the house weren't even, well, it wasn't even my energy to begin with. It was like my dad's, it was like me retroactively trying to like live by my dad's rules that I was somehow expecting to like have that like in my adult relationship in my house now. And I'm like, this makes no sense. And just being able to like let go of that and be like, yeah, like you said, bringing in the new fresh energy, it's so amazing. And again, like what it frees up internally, and then yeah, and just the self-forgiveness that's available,
Mm-hmm.
and not
Mm-hmm.
continuing to punish yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Which again,
Yeah.
it's that 60s housewife energy, some of that too, right? Is it like, I am going to keep you on task, I'm going to make sure that no one gets out of line.
Totally. Totally. And like, we can live in this picture perfect. And if I am just perfect, then life has a better chance of being perfect and meeting my needs. And that's just not true. Life is not going to be perfect, and we're not going to be perfect. So, like, let's grapple with that.
Yeah. Well, so one of the ways that you're grappling with that, which I want to hear more about, is the AuraTransformation. Like, talk about what that is and how you found it and how it works and all the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking of the aura as the energetic immune system.
Mm.
So it's like the energy bubble around us that is discerning what is my energy and belongs to me, whether that's emotional or, I don't know, electric, and what belongs to the collective or outside my bubble. And for a lot of us, I think we have leaky auras, and not because we did anything wrong or bad. In fact, I think it's on the process to transforming to something better. But in the way of in the process towards transforming, it's like breaking down for some people. And so, like, people who are highly sensitive, sometimes it's not that they're like so sensitive, it's just that their aura isn't taking care of them the way it used to. So I I've done IFS for 10 years, and I started to feel a little frustrated with how slow some of it was going with some of my more vulnerable parts. And so I kind of had my intent. I mean, I still love, love, love IFS. So like, like, I think that's just a common experience of like, we all want change faster. Right. And so I kind of was having my antenna up to some degree, just like, is there something faster that's not bypassing, that's not going to like gloss over stuff? And I happened to come across this woman talking about AuraTransformation, and her presence was so compelling that I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I want what you have. And so I started, I signed up for her list, and I started following her and signed up for one of her webinars about AuraTransformation. And I was like, these are big promises. And if even half of them are true, I want it. And I didn't really care too much about the details of it. And so it's a hands-on process. So I went to New Mexico, and so it's bigger in Europe. The person who started it was from Scandinavia. And there's only like 5 or 7 people who do it here in the United States. And so I picked one out, went to New Mexico, and it was interesting when I got there because I like try to do this whole intuitive process about deciding which person to go with. And I had a really nice conversation with David. And then I got there and I was flooded with anxiety and like, oh no, I picked the wrong person. And what am I doing? What am I getting myself into? This is crazy. So I had like 24 hours of some of the biggest anxiety I've ever felt in my life. And we're getting ready to do the session and I'm helping him set up the room a little bit. And he says the opening prayer and instantly, just like that, the anxiety was gone. And I have never in my life of being a highly anxious person experienced that with anything. And I was like, okay, this is something, like if it's placebo, it's a really good placebo. And then, so let's see, what do you want me to talk about, what it is or what the effects have been, or?
I mean, talk about, what it is and just sort of what the process was like as you were there in New Mexico having your treatment, and then, sort of where you took it, from there after you left, sort of what were the reverberations you started to feel?
Yeah. So it's a hands-on process. It's 2 sessions. First one is about 3 to 3.5 hours. Second one is like about an hour and a half. And in this session, it's like a highly efficient and effective way of upgrading your energy or upgrading your aura. And I've been trying to do a little bit more scientific research about it because I'm really curious about biofields and auras now. And there are people who are researching biofields. And there is science behind like being able to measure a person's biofield or their aura out to like 5 or 6 or even bigger than that. And I think that's so fascinating.
That's like the heart math stuff, right? Where they're measuring
Yes.
sort of the electrical emanations coming out of your heart, like literally.
Yeah, exactly. And that their heart has the strongest electromagnetic field and it's emanating from there. But even our skin has some amount of detectable electrical fields in our brain. So yeah, so that's what the aura is. It's like all the energy that belongs to you inside this field. And that layer on the outside is like the protective layer. And so in the AuraTransformation, what's happening is calling back all your energy to you. And now what I'm learning about the science is what it is bringing it back into the midline of your body so that it can recirculate. So there's like a channel that flows up and down the middle. And then at least one researcher is saying it goes up and down the middle, and then it goes out like a spout around the top and the bottom. And that's what creates the protective layer. So that first section is just bringing all that energy in. And it, for most people, it just feels really good. It feels like coming home. There may be stuff that comes up that's like, ready to release and heal, but it's so gentle and kind. And it's not like a overwhelming kind of, healing of releasing old energy. And then we dissolve the old aura. And I've been surprised in my sessions with people. Like I really feel like sometimes it feels like a vacuum sucking the aura off, or, I can't remember what other tangible sensations I've had, but it's so distinct and strong at times. It's like, wow, something is really happening here. And then from there, the spirit is brought back into the body. So if you look at the traditions that have come up with what the aura looks like, many traditions have come up with this view of like multiple chakras. And like some people say there's way more than 7 too. Like we can have many energy centers all around us. And then at least 7 layers of energy bodies that protect us. And that's like a lot of different layers to manage and all the chakras. And so like the idea with this upgraded energy is that it's simplifying the process. So rather than having to like rebalance 7 or more chakras and patch up or heal all the different layers of your aura. This is just one layer of aura. And rather than your spirit or your soul being on the outside of your aura, it's coming into your body so that you can have more direct knowing, more intuition, more clarity about your life's purpose and things that are a yes for you and things that are a no for you. So, yeah, and then you wrap up with the aura. And again, it's been so fascinating to me because I'm a kinesthetic person and I can really feel the aura wrapping up. And it's been different for every person. Like some people, like the first person I did, it was like this wrapping around and around and around and around, just up and down and up and down. And so like the second person I did, I was like, I tried to do that and it wasn't working. So I was like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And it was just like zip. And it just had this feeling of just zipping top to bottom. And then it was done. And it's like such distinct feelings. And so it's like, I can't argue with what my hands are showing me. And yeah, so, could be the power of my imagination, but I also believe our minds are incredible. And so like some people, like I have a skeptical husband, so that's maybe why I talk about some of this stuff of like, is it real or is it not real? But there's so much research about the power of placebo. Like our minds are incredible, what we can do. Like there's research about placebo studies on surgery, and people think they got a surgery and they're healed and they didn't even get it. They got the placebo surgery. So like, what we don't know the limits to what our brain and our minds and our intentions and our consciousness can do. So whatever is happening, I have found it really powerful. And, I
Because
have
just
been
to
on
clarify, like, yeah, because you received an aura transformation, but then you also trained in the modality as well.
That's right. Yeah, thanks. And, I have been on the path of looking for help to like feel like I can be myself and be solid in myself and who I am and trusting myself for a long time, more than 10 years. And I've been a highly anxious person and a lot of fear. And I would have taken any method to bring me the placebo healing. But so I don't know, like I guess I just keep coming back to like something really is powerfully going on with AuraTransformation because I'm hardly anxious now at all. And it does come up on occasion, but it's like I relate to it so differently and it moves on so much faster. And I just know it's temporary. And so like, after doing IFS for a while, anxiety became a visitor rather than the regular thing. Now it's like hardly ever here.
Wow.
And so like that is massive for me. And it feels like a miracle, honestly. Like I want to swear about it. I'm so excited about it because it's like because of like how much I've worked on trying to not be an anxious person.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like the proof is in my lived experience. And so I want other people to have that, like I think there's so much suffering going on in the world and there's so many people who are highly sensitive that bring gifts and we need those gifts in this world. And when we're held up by the fears or the overwhelm or, nervous system stimulation, that's just like too much, like having powerful tools that can bring that regulation faster and easier. We need that. And for me, it hasn't been glossing over the deeper stuff. Like I still do IFS, but it just moves faster now. And I did have some bumps after my AuraTransformation, a couple of weeks of really intense anxiety. And that was like the final, like the biggest clearing out of letting that go. Yeah. I have so much I can say about it, but I wonder if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, so again, like talking, the distinction between, having received one yourself, but then also training in it to give the transformation healings to others. Was there an additional round of healing that came in when you trained to be a practitioner? Like, did you feel sort of things that had come up in your own healing suddenly hit a new level, like when you were learning to give to other people?
Yeah, for sure. It was like she describes it as like a AuraTransformation top up or a AuraTransformation 2.0. And really what it's not super fancy in the training. It was like 5 days, but really what's happening is we are becoming the blueprint and like the model of the energy that people are going to take on and just the vehicle for it. And so, like it was like a deeper connection in the AuraTransformation, they call it the crystal energy, that what this more up, like one thing I've been thinking about lately, I'd be interested to hear your opinion of this, but like there's so many different energies out there and vibrations and frequencies and low and high and all that, and none of them are good or bad. But I think what's happening with AuraTransformation is it's tapping into a particular frequency, and they call it the crystal energy. And like the people who can see auras see it as pink, and I can't see auras. But anyways, why did I go off track with that? Oh yeah, so it's just the training is getting a deeper connection and like a hookup to that crystal energy, so that I'm the vehicle for people to receive it.
And so, yeah, you said that, like, yeah, suddenly your relationship to music changed again, so sort of how, can you just say a little bit more about, you were saying sort of as 2020 came in, you were like, maybe I'm done, maybe I'm not doing music anymore. And then now you're just so joyfully back, playing the blues and like putting these like awesome videos up and yeah, getting ready to do workshops and stuff. So what flipped the switch, like in terms of the transformation? Was it just like automatic that it suddenly just came to you, or was there a process of sort of suddenly dipping your toe back in and realizing how much more there was? Or yeah, how did that work?
Yeah, it was dipping my toe back in. So I had the transformation done in January of 2023. And a few months later, I was playing for something that was solo piano, which I hardly ever do. Usually I perform with other musicians. And I realized that the pattern that I have used my whole life is to fly out of my body when I'm under pressure and when the adrenaline hits. And like, like I've been working at this for a long time. I've learned a lot of embodiment practices and grounding practices, but suddenly I had a different sense. I really think it was like my spirit trying to get away from me, get away from the pressure. And I was able to pull it back in a very gentle way. And suddenly I realized, like, all these years when I get nervous, my energy leaves my hands. And like the presence leaves my hands and my arms. And so like I get nervous and it's adrenaline. And so it's like the muscle memory can take over, especially with these more effective practice techniques I've learned, but like the presence wasn't there. And now I can pull the presence back into my body and into my hands and my fingers. And like that is a whole new way to perform. And like probably some people have learned how to do that from an early age, but for me, it was like a defining moment.
Wow.
A big deal. And then a second thing happened shortly after that. My grandfather died. And so I went to the family funeral. And, as I was saying, like my family is so musical and everybody shares music, but there's also like this element of, performing for the family and pressure and feeling obligation to do it. And for the first time, I really could just set that outside, and like it was outside my aura. It was far away from me, that obligation. It wasn't even in my field. And I had the freedom to make the choice. Do I want to make music now or not? And I wanted to, and I made music from that place. And that was healing for me to be able to make music from that place instead of from the obligation place.
Yeah, and being able to, do that in the presence of your family. I mean, sort of like the biggest pressure cooker of them all. It's like, take a hike, Carnegie Hall. It's like, play for your family, especially if there's, musicians in the family, right? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And like, and I want this for other people, like the freedom to be able to be themselves, even like with your immediate family and in the places where you're most triggered. Like, and like my family loves me and I want to be able to love them. And so like, finally having some space from the baggage that I've carried around for a long time and worked at for a long time, it just like melted away. And I just want that for more people. So like, I would say, the sharing of videos and stuff, the thing that's driving me with that is like, this has been so huge in my life. And I want other people to have that too. Because like we need more love, we deserve to be loved, and when that's available, like we want to be in a place where we can receive that love and care. And I think that's one of the keys to healing whatever's going on in our world right now.
Well, and I just want to like brag on you, because it's like, I think that not only is it clearly like a value that you hold, but you are so good at it. Like, you are so amazing at holding space and doing it in a way where it's gentle and it's genuinely supportive. I think that like I've been in sort of music classes with people who were maybe slumming it, who like needed a gig and needed some money, and they were like, oh, I'm going to teach a series of classes and whatever, and that's fine. They might have had wisdom to share or whatever, but then there would be that sneaky like competitiveness almost in their teaching, where it wasn't actually about generosity. It was actually about like, I'm so wonderful, and so now I'm going to show you how wonderful I am, and maybe you might be able to be on my level someday. And there's none of that with you. Like the one workshop, the first workshop where we met, I mean, I just couldn't get over how gentle everything was. And it was very just sort of putting broccoli in the brownies or whatever, where you're like, come and talk about, your creative process. And then all of a sudden you're like, dun, 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 IFS, and it's like hit you with this like amazing life-changing knowledge, but it's in such a supportive context. So I feel like you were really uniquely good at that. So I'm excited to see you like do more with it. And again, feel more of yourself as you bring that to the world.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, one of my learning curves right now is like how to stay resilient with bringing that forward, because, it's like, there's a lot of people offering stuff right now, and the marketplace is noisy, and I don't want to get into like that markety, salesy kind of thing. I do want it to be coming from this place of sharing my gifts. So like finding that path forward is interesting. And when we met, I had offered a bunch of like IFS taster sessions or group sessions. And then I took a big break from that because I felt like there was, some of what was driving that was the need to feel like I was good enough or feel like I was valued or whatever. And so I'm glad that wasn't coming through in our sessions, but it was there inside of me. And so now I feel like I'm coming back to it in a whole new level of giving from this place of like knowing that there's so much more possible for all of us as humans, and especially wanting to call to those people who are like me, highly sensitive, easily overwhelmed, who care a lot about the world, who feel wounded, who have wounds, and who also want more and are ready for more. Like those are my people. And to me, it's not at all about being the teacher. It's more like, I have this vision. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like, we're all standing out on this field and we plant our flag of, here's what I have to offer. And like, we go around to these little plantings and like, we share with each other, like we're all mutually sharing and learning and growing together. It's not like one teacher on the hill that we all go to, and like, I'm so much on this path and so much to learn still. So, I have the people that I love to learn from too.
But also it's again, like it's so brave of you though to commit to doing it even when you weren't feeling it 100% internally, because I think that also can be such a thing for sort of people who are raised and cultured as feminine, as women, and where it's like we feel like we have to be 100% impeccable before we can do anything at all, and like getting over that can be really huge. I mean, the like it's such a handy slightly mean saying, but like, Lord, give me the confidence of a mediocre white man, because I just sort of feel like I know a lot of dudes who don't have that level of internal questioning before they go out and they do what they do, and they may be brilliant, they may be not, whatever, but like that internal resistance to giving isn't there in quite the same way that I see in women who are absurdly talented. And I mean, this is going to be my plug for women who are listening to this podcast. If you want to be on this podcast, come do it, because it's like I've reached out to so many of my women friends and I'm like, come talk to me about the creative ways that you're raising your children, and come talk to me about the music you're making and whatever. And I've had a lot of women turn me down, and it makes me sad, and I don't think that it's from any conscious state of self-loathing or anything like that, but they're like, oh, I'm busy, or oh, I just don't have the clarity to come do it right now, or which is fine. I mean, people need to take the time that they need, but I just want, and so I think that that's also just in itself a good a good teachery thing that you have done of just being like, I may not be 100% ready to give these sessions in the ways that I want to, but you did it anyway. And it connected. I mean, stuff landed with me, you know, before you took a break from doing that. And that was transformational. So it's like the wisdom sneaks out, you know, when and where and how it needs to.
I love so much that you're saying this, Allison. And I think the sneaky way it can come in with people who are interested in the spiritual life or personal growth is like, is this in alignment? And, you know, that is can be a really good question of discernment, but it also can be a question of, am I perfect enough to do this?
Right.
Or do I have all my ducks in a row enough to do this? And so, yeah, I really love that. And, you know, I think that's one of the things I'm embracing more is like, yeah, like I don't know if I'll ever get over the need for validation in some way. Like we all need to be received and felt like we're contributing to the world. So like, is that validation? Is that just like knowing that we're making an impact on other people? You know, like, so yeah, there's a little shadow side to it still that's like way better than it was 5 years ago. But like, yeah, it's really landing with me that like, don't let that hold me up from offering. And so now it's like, for me, it's like I have these ideas of workshops to offer and knowing how to bring those into fruition to meet people's needs, and not like what are the things to listen to about internally, like what do I listen to, and then externally people's feedback to me about that, what do I listen to? And that's kind of the question I'm sitting with right now. And yeah.
So what do you have coming up then? Like what are you offering in the near future, both musically and with IFS and AuraTransformation and all that kind of good stuff?
Well, right now it's just one-on-one sessions, but the idea is in my head, and you can tell me your feedback. And if anybody else wants to tell me feedback, I'm open to it. One idea is to have like a weekly or bi-weekly gathering of connecting with the energy of music. And this is something that I really want to make happen, but I don't know exactly how to get the communication across. But the idea is that what we would do is have a time of like a short meditation, but it's more the intention of connecting with this energy that, to me, it feels like the energy of music. Like it has its own flavor, its own creative spark that we can intentionally dial into. And so we like set the stage by connecting to that. And then we go off while our Zoom is on and do some music making silently, or, you know, on mute. And like we hold the group field together while we do that, which amplifies the ability to connect to it. And then we come back and share, and like we could do multiple rounds of that. So that's one idea I want to bring to the forefront. But like then I get so hung up on like when to do it and how to, you know, like all the questions get in the way.
Well, I'm obsessed with this idea because personally, in the past few years, when I've been more intentional about my just morning daily altar practice, you know, where I light a candle and put out a little cup of water and light some incense, and the little sort of prayers that I do at a certain point, you know, I sort of go in 4 stages. And, you know, the first stages of prayers are to, you know, the higher beings, you know, gods and goddesses and angels and avatars. And at some point I put in that first section, the spirit of music. And so I'm totally with you on what is the spirit? What is that being? What is the sort of oversoul of the thing that gets expressed through, yeah, classical piano or electric guitar, or, you know, Robert Fripp's guitar is definitely bringing some very, very holy sounds. Local musician John Mulder definitely bringing the spirit into his jazz. And so, but what is that, and how can I be in relation to it? So let's talk offline. And like
Yeah.
I want to see this happen, and I want to be part of it, and I want to help you bring this out, because it seems really amazing and really like, yeah, exciting.
And then just to say, you know, I offer one-on-one sessions. So I work with musicians in a coaching aspect. And, you know, for a long time, I was a vocal coach. And so people who come to me to like learn their music or prepare for auditions. And now I am bringing in this more energetic aspect to it. And the people I've worked with have found it to be really powerful. I mean, just tuning into the energy level while we're making music, I think, remembering that this is creating vibration, and we can be open to the vibration in new ways and what the kind of vibrations that are coming up in us, and tune in when the vibration gets tight or when the energy gets tight in us. Let's pay attention to that. When it's feeling good and open, how do we make more of that? So yeah, I really am excited about bringing that into one-on-one coachings. And then I host rep rallies, which are repertoire rallies. And this started as a group of singers, maybe more than 10 years, probably maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Singers got together because they just needed a chance to practice in front of people, and they hired a pianist. And so I was one of their pianists to do that. And then when the person organizing it got tired of it, I inherited the list. And so now I have shaped it into the thing that aligns with me better, which is like, we do a grounding meditation. We set the intention of connecting to the energy of music, and we hold a very respectful space while people get the chance to perform, and they can ask for what they need in the way of audience. So like, it might be they need feedback, and what kind of feedback do you want? Or maybe no feedback at all, just listen. Or, or maybe like repeating one song over and over again, I want it to be a space where there's a lot of possibility for a person to take ownership. In the classical music world, I think we've been, taught to not have ownership, like follow the conductor, do what the director says, whatever. So it's like, what do you need as a person to get the most out of your 20 minutes in the spotlight here? So I do that. And so people can sign up for the list. I kind of do like a crowdsourcing date. Every month I send out an email and say, here's some possibilities, who wants to sign up? So yeah, you can just reach out to me about that. And then I offer IFS sessions, Zoom and online or in person, and then AuraTransformation, which is in person in Chicago.
So for people who want this information, who want to be on the list, who want to know about everything, where do they find you? Where are you accessible online to people who are listening to this and are now in love with you and obsessed with what you're offering?
You're so kind, Allison.
No, this has just brought me joy. Like, I've been so excited about this, and this chat has been living up to everything that I'd hoped it would be.
Oh, good. Well, my website is innerartistry.space, and my email is marta@innerartistry.space. So those are the best ways. I mean, I do a little bit of social media, but I would say that's not the primary way I connect with people.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to put those, put your addresses in the show notes so that people can easily click over if they're checking out the show notes on my blog. Well, yeah. Is there anything else that you want to chat about before we wrap up? Any parting words of wisdom? Any coda on the end of the phrase?
Ooh, I love that. Well, the only thing that's coming up, and hopefully this isn't opening a whole new thing, but just saying, like, AuraTransformation, I think, has a lot of potential for people who do stuff in the spotlight, because, one other thing I realized is that part of my nerves was that I was feeling other people's feelings in the space. And now that I have a more solid aura where it's like, I can ask the question, is this mine? And anybody can ask that question at any time, but it's more clear, more quickly. And I can just leave it alone more easily if it's not mine, and even send it out of my aura space if it's not mine, which again, anybody can do, but it just feels simpler and faster now. And so and I'm just eager to be making music with people who do get an aura transformation, because I just am really curious about how this can enhance creativity and confidence, and just like really allowing the person's true essence to shine on stage.
Oh God, that's so, I mean, yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, what does that sound like when you get a bunch of people together who have had aura transformations? Like, what does that music then sound like? What does that come out sounding like and feeling like? And how does it affect the space and the people who are receiving it, the people who are making it? Like, wow, that's something to look forward to in life as we all get a little bit more healed as we go forward.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Allison.
Oh my gosh, Marta, thank you so much for being up for this and having this just like wonderful, like heart opening talk. I just sort of, like I said, I feel so elevated from even where I was. I was already excited, like I said, before we did this. And now I'm just feeling both grounded and excited for, possibilities in my own life and with music making, and just with what's happening here in Chicago. And again, being in community with folks like you is just really inspiring and important. So thank you for everything that you're doing out in the world. And thank you for chatting with me today.
Yes, so much of my pleasure. And I'm so honored you asked me, and I can't wait for more.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of I'll Follow You. Don't forget that you can always find show notes over on my website, queenofpeaches.com. Links to and for previous episodes are listed there as well. While you're there, I hope you might find another episode that strikes your fancy. All my recordings are assembled in my home studio using the free open-source cross-platform editing software Audacity. I use a Logitech G Snowball Ice microphone and Shure SRH 440 professional studio headphones. The theme music is from the song Without You, written by Brian Cremens and performed by the band 1000. This podcast is made possible by the fact that I work a full-time job, am happily married, and don't have any children. That's what really goes on behind the scenes of this artistic life.